Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran Ayub, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. It's episode 69.
Cool. How's it going?
You know, I got an infection on my hand.
Oh no. Vampire?
I got bit by a vampire fork, literal fork tines, dirty dish fork. I was doing the dishes and, you know, I had that container where you put all the cutlery and it was falling off the counter. And I reflexively went to go grab it.
Mm-hmm.
And I slapped my hand right into a whole bunch of dirty fork tines, right into like the wrist, right where it hinges on the palm. And I got an infection.
Oh boy.
So I had to go to the doctor because it was like spreading up my arm. And I was telling you about this offline, but I was nervous about it. So I drew using a Sharpie, I drew a circle around the inflamed area, and because it's hard to know if things are spreading or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it started working its way up my arm and not getting better. I'm like, okay, well, let's go to the doctor. And now I'm currently on antibiotics to prevent the vampirism from spreading.
Yeah, I was going to say, was that just over a day, or was that a couple days, or?
It was like over 2 days. So it happened
fast.
Last Thursday.
Yeah.
And then I went to the urgent care Saturday morning because I was like, okay, this is clearly getting worse.
Right.
And it, things like this can get really bad really fast.
Yes.
So, but now I'm I think it's pretty much 100% cleared up now because I've been on the antibiotic now for 4 or 5 days.
Good.
And
so you will not be turning into a fork.
I will not be turning into a fork.
Good.
Or a vampire.
Good.
Or a fork vampire.
I'm glad. We need you here.
How's it going for you?
Good. Remember last time I said I was reading Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson? I finished it.
Nice.
It's done. Yep. I powered through that thing, over the course of a week. And it took 6 months or something to wait for it on hold at the library. So here I am at the end of this book, and I'm like, oh man, now I have to wait, months for the library to get me the next book. But no, turns out it's already available. It just needs to be delivered to my local library. So I should be getting it this week. The next book, because most people are waiting for the first book, and then only a small percentage of those people actually move on to the next book.
Yeah, you're past the wide part of the funnel.
Exactly. Yeah, because I thought I was ready to go to Barnes and Noble or Half Price Books or somewhere to order the next book so that I could read it because I don't want to wait so long. But luckily, the library has come through, and I'll be reading that hopefully this week or next week. Awesome. All right. Should we get to the news for the week of May 25th?
We should.
Yeah, we have some Meta Framework news. Astro 6.4 is out. And what's new in this release? They have a new Markdown.processor API. They've got faster Markdown builds with, is it Satari?
I think I would go with that. I don't know.
I'm not sure. It has an accent over the A, so this is confusing my American brain here. This is like an umlaut over it. And then Cloudflare helpers for advanced routing. So I think obviously the headliner here is the Markdown processor API. So just reading through the blog post a little bit, it says Astro's Markdown pipeline has always been built around Unified, which is Remark, Rehype, and those types of packages. That ecosystem is powerful, having thousands of plugins available, but perhaps it's not up to your taste. Astro 6.4 adds a new Markdown.processor configuration option that lets you swap that pipeline out entirely. So the default processor is still going to be unified, so existing projects will just keep working. But if you want to, you can just swap that out totally, which is pretty cool because you recently did something with Astro. Is that right?
Yeah. I've been working really very recently on porting our documentation site for excaliburjs.com to Astro.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of reasons for that.
Yeah. There's a bunch of reasons. Docusaurus is good. I'd say if you are using Docusaurus, continue to use Docusaurus if you don't need to customize a lot.
Right.
And we just have a lot of needs as like a documentation site for like our particular like framework where we need a lot of different integrations. And then it's kind of come to a head where we need TypeDoc to work well. And there's just friction between Docusource and TypeDoc that has been unresolved for a while.
Yeah. I think we are looking for first-party integration with our TypeScript API and building that into the docs natively without having to use these dependencies that we have to update or that fall out of date, or in this case, don't get maintained anymore. And then that blocks our main TypeScript upgrade path.
That does. But this is really cool. I actually need to take a look at this because I'm actually on this latest version of Astro, which is super cool. And I'm getting the warning right now about the remark stuff. So this will be a thing I'll be taking a closer look at here, probably today or tomorrow, to see if I can't use these new Markdown processor APIs to increase the speed of our build.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Next up in Meta Framework news, there has been some updates to Svelte, and you can read all about it in the blog post, What's New in Svelte, June 2026. I'm not going to go through every single thing, but we already covered that TypeScript 6 is now supported in SvelteKit, so that's one of the highlights. They've also got a new Svelte MCP server. It has a standard I/O mode, which can now read file content directly, so that's kind of cool. They've got some Vite plugins and other things like that, and of course they have a whole bunch of community highlights for different apps and sites built with Svelte. So you can go take a look at that. There is some new episodes on This Week in Svelte if you want to watch those on YouTube. So it goes through some of the change logs.
Next, we have a blog post from Socket talking about how the Rust project is moving to restrict LLM use in their contributions after a lot of debate. And I actually really like this take, especially from a language like Rust, where they like security and safety is super paramount. Rust has topped Stack Overflow's most admired languages for like 9 years. It's been also an extremely attractive target for LLMs because of the strictness of the compiler and the type system, which gives you like a lot of guardrails for the stochastic ping pong ball of LLMs, which makes AI-assisted Rust development more reliable than other like more permissive languages. So there's been a new policy in the Rust, the Rust group, and this is they're banning LLM authorship, which makes sense, but they're allowing LLM assistance, and they have kind of a nuanced take on what that means.
Yeah, so, and I think it's good to talk about what the nuances are, because it's not just as blanket as like banning all LLM use. And we've tried to talk about this nuance a whole bunch of times on the podcast, but the Socket blog post that we'll link to has just a really nice summary of what the policy is. So one of those things is what's allowed is you can ask the LLM questions about the code base. You can have it summarize issues or pull requests for your own use. You can use it to privately review your own code before posting, and generating possible solutions to study before writing your own implementation from scratch. You can also write your own dev tools for personal use as long as they don't get merged upstream, right? So in this capacity is how I would describe using the LLM as a coach versus like an agent, right? Instead of writing stuff, you're using it to ask questions and review things or for your own edification, right? Now, the banned list covers the most common problem areas. So you can't use an LLM to write comments or PR descriptions. You can't use it to write documentation in compiler diagnostics. And if there's any workflow where an LLM review basically treated as the grounds to merge or reject a change, like it can't just be solely based on an LLM review. Now, when they say that LLM use is restricted for authorship, there is a middle category, which is case by case. So you could use AI assistants to do machine translation, trivial code changes that don't meet a threshold of originality, and you can use it for LLM-powered review bots. So review bots are allowed, but they have a lot of constraints. They have to operate from a separate GitHub account. They must be blockable by individual users. They can't post verbatim LLM output on a personal account, and their comments cannot be blocking without explicit endorsement from the human reviewer. And then they also have a further part of the policy, which is like an experimental sort of like measurement, where they do allow LLM authored code, but it's under really strict conditions. The PR has to be solicited by a reviewer in advance. The change can't touch any safety critical components, like the trait system or MIR building, whatever that is. It has to be well tested and well reviewed, and both the author and reviewer must be able to fully explain the code. And so those PRs are going to be tracked, and they're going to be tracked so that they can figure out whether they're actually producing useful contributions. So I think this is like a really like practical policy, and I agree with pretty much all of it, especially the like trivial code changes. Because I mean, I've had Copilot or whatever review my code for bug fixes or security issues, and sometimes it's like a one-line change that it ends up with. And like, I don't want to tell people or advise people like you can't use an LLM to do that, because it would have been the same exact code that I would have wrote to like fix the issue if I had found it. But I wouldn't have found it unless I had used, an LLM to actually review the code. So I think this is pretty cool, but it does help get rid of this whole issue of like using an LLM to write something totally from scratch and just claiming that it's an original authorship, because I don't think that's the best way to like use an LLM for like a brand new feature or something that doesn't exist yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is an extremely pragmatic take, especially in like a safety critical area. Like, I feel like this is an extremely safe, like we're going to dip our toe in, we're open-minded, but we're going to be very careful, which I like.
Yeah. And there's the two camps, right? That there's been like a huge debate internally on the Rust like ecosystem in the community of like, how do we balance this? Like on one end, you have folks that, want zero LLM use, right? And then you also don't want to be like super permissive to be like, oh yeah, we'll just accept whatever sloppy PRs come our way. Like obviously there's nuance here. And so the three reasons that they give for the policy is, first of all, many people find LLM generated code and writing deeply unpleasant to read or review, which I agree with.
Mm-hmm.
But also, many people find LLMs to be a significant aid to learning and discovery. And right now, they're currently dealing with a deluge of low-effort slop PRs, primarily authored by LLMs. So having the policy makes these easier to moderate without having to take every single instance on a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're also adding that lying about LLM use is going to be treated as a code of conduct violation rather than like a policy violation. So this will carry different consequences. So don't lie about it. Awesome. Next on our list of news is Porffor has made some serious improvements lately, and the Porffor.dev website is being served from a Porffor compiled TypeScript native binary. And you can go read all about it on the Porffor website. And they have the live uptime. As of this recording here, it's been up for 3 days and 3 hours. And this is super cool. Porffor, for those not in the know, is a ahead-of-time compiler for JavaScript and TypeScript. This is great for fast, embedded things like that you want to use JavaScript for. And their tagline right here is, Porffor compiles JavaScript to C, C to native. Anywhere you can use C, you can now use JavaScript. So this is huge.
That's cool.
And it's definitely a testament to like the progress they've made towards this ahead of time compiling that they can serve the website, which I think is super cool. Like this is just super cool. I want to try and play with this.
That's a really nice milestone.
Yeah. And the author of Porffor, they have a blog post all about it that you can go and read. Oliver Medhurst over on goose.icu, and they talk all about how they have done this. So pretty cool. Next, we have some ECMAScript news. Thank you, Rob Palmer. There's 3 things I want to highlight that are very exciting that we missed last episode. there's the stage 4 promotion of 3 different proposals. The first one is the explicit resource management API. Now, this is the C#-esque using declaration, so where you can automatically call anything that implements a symbol.dispose. So this is in C#. There's like this idea of a disposable object where it might have some external resources that it created in another system or over the network or in the operating system that you want to clean up. And that's the same idea here. So you have resources that are external to the code that need to be cleaned up. So it might be file handles, it might be network connections, it might be whatever you can think of. But this has now moved to stage 4, which is awesome. I've been waiting for this for a while, and this is going to be great. And if you don't know what using does, is when control flow leaves the using block, things are cleaned up.
Yep, that's pretty sweet.
Next on the ECMAScript news, stage 4 for atomics.pos. And I forgot what atomic.pos does.
We talked about atomics a while back.
Atomics.pos is for better spinning. So it performs a finite time wait for a very short time that runtimes can implement with like appropriate CPU hinting. So unlike atomics.wait, since it doesn't block, it can be called from both the main and the worker threads. So this is like nice if you needed like to have like a little bit of a fence for anything you needed to do, across any kind of synchronization. So you're like, let's just spin lock here. I'm not going to block the main thread, but I'm going to pause and then I'm going to recheck and I'm going to pause and I'm going to recheck. So that's the main impetus for this, is for implementing spin locks. And spin locks, while inefficient per se, one advantage is that it doesn't block the thread. You can do other things while you spin.
I think one of the main use cases that it cites is an ECMAScript, which has a busy loop to emulate a blocking wait in its implementation. So that's in order to implement mutexes. So allowing micro waits will improve the power and scheduling efficiency of multi-threaded applications compiled using ECMAScript. So that's kind of nice. So I'll have some downstream effects for anything built on top of ECMAScript.
The next one is stage 4 promotion of joint iteration. This provides synchronized iteration over multiple iterators. So this is like iterator.zip. So for example, like you want to combine 2 iterators together into one output. You want to do zip to object, which vends an object per iteration. So you can spit out an object as you're iterating over it. It's pretty slick, especially if you are working with iterators over the network, like or you're doing any kind of thing with like generators. This can be super, super useful.
That is neat. And because these are all stage 4, they're already implemented in most runtimes, because runtimes start to implement these at stage 3.
That's right.
So you can already use the using and symbol.dispose in Node 24, which is pretty cool. But we do have one security PSA for our security corner, and it is a malicious post-install hook that was found in over 700 GitHub repositories, including Packagist and Node.js projects. So that's no fun. Packagist, by the way, is for the PHP ecosystem, but I think most of us here are JavaScript developers, so the Node.js projects are no fun. They do say that it's not clear. They haven't confirmed how many represent actual distinct compromises and package artifacts, but just to be aware that if you are using like Git-based resolution of your NPM packages, which you probably shouldn't be doing, but sometimes you might do it for dev branches and stuff, to be aware that there is a bad post-install hook, malicious post-install hook. So of course, the mitigation, as we've talked about before, disable install scripts if you're using npm, or use a different tool like pnpm, which disables them by default.
Yep. And I think only 3 of these, according to the article, still had malicious commits on them. I think that was Silver Stripe, CMS, Crosshair, Libbase, and TZI Chat UI still had commits on main or on their dev branches that had the malicious hook.
So in one area where it says that is the most vulnerable are starter kits, because when you create like a npm create and you do like a starter kit, it pulls down the repository to your local machine and then runs npm install, which would, if you don't have ignore scripts on globally, if you don't have that enabled, it'll run the post install hook when you create the template. So starter kits are the most vulnerable for this case. So the Dev Dojo Wave is a Laravel SaaS starter kit, and then the Dev Dojo Genesis. Those two were the most practical risks. So yeah, I didn't even think about that initially, because even if it's in the branch and not published, if it's a starter kit, you would actually still pull it down if you're doing like an npm create. So you got to be careful with those.
Awesome. We have a few library watches. And this first one is kind of like a meta library watch, but it's a new website from the folks over at the E18E, Viget and Natilo on Blue Sky. It's called Replacements.fyi. So if you are using like some packages and you're wondering if, you know what, is there a thing that I can use that's just like a snippet? So they have examples here like left pad, is number, Object.assign, those kind of things. Like it'll tell you what you can use instead in modern JavaScript. So like, for example, like Object.assign, they have like, you can just use Object.assign. It's like been around since Chrome 45 and Safari 9. So you're probably okay using it. So this is just a native browser feature. So this is just maybe something to like, next time you're reaching for maybe a package you've used forever, to be like, I wonder if I actually need to use this. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, I just put in Moment in there because I use Moment.js for my app, and it suggested community choices for day.js and date functions. And actually, in my last job, we used date functions, which is pretty good because it's tree shakeable. And Moment is a bit less tree shakeable. Plus, if you bring in those time zones, those can blow up your bundle size quite a bit. So yeah, just put in one of your packages and see if you don't need it anymore.
That's right. Next up, a library from the famous Matt Pocock, Sandcastle, which is a local coding agent orchestration framework in TypeScript. You invoke the agents with a single like sandcastle.run. Sandcastle handles sandboxing the agent with configurable branch strategies. The commits are made on those branches and get merged back in. It's provider agnostic, so it ships with built-in providers for Docker, Podman, Vercel. Create your own, do your own thing. You can parallelize multiple AFK agents, create review pipelines, or just orchestrating however you want to do it. So like we've talked about, it's probably a good idea to not have these just running on your just bare system.
Yes.
Where they might scoop up your .ssh file or scoop up some .envs.
Yep.
So this feels like a really useful thing if this is what you're doing. And this is a TypeScript show, so we like TypeScript here.
Yep. And it also looks like there's some APIs to do work trees too, which we've talked about. Like Git work trees are really nice because they basically are in separate folders. So it's almost like cloning your GitHub repository, but kind of built in so that an agent can work separately while you, the human, work on the main branch or whatever branch you want to work in. So that, because normally only one branch is active, right, in a Git repo. But with work trees, you can have separate work trees. They can be at different places in the code base, all totally separate, but still managed at the top level in the Git repository.
Super slick. Awesome. The next one we have is rspack just got smarter. So 2 recent optimizations were added to rspack to remove more unused code. So first off, inline booleans can make branch local dependencies inactive. This is like that thing in Webpack where if you did like mode development equals whatever, it can just drop that code completely from the bundle. So that's great. Like that's exactly what kind of thing you want. So like their example here is very similar. It's like is dev, if it's dev, don't include the other branch in your bundle, which is nice. And then the other thing is namespace default re-exports now preserve property level usage. So in their example, they have a file called like API.js and they do export const unused and it's a string unused. And this can be tree shaken. So for example, in their barrel, they have like import all of that API and then they do a default export. So they export default API. And then in the third file where you're actually using like a thing from that, transitive import, the unused part in that barrel that can be dropped. Because before what would happen is you'd get the whole barrel,
right?
Which is kind of a bummer,
yeah.
Especially if you're doing library development like we are. we do a lot of barrels because we need to export all of the things that we're working on. But in tree shaking, you might not, as a consumer, be using that API. You want that to be tree shaken.
Exactly. Yeah, this is nice. What it sounds like they're doing is just better cross-module analysis and detection, because this used to be really hard. Like if you did a barrel export, as the compiler or as the bundler, you wouldn't be able to know for sure like what actually gets used at the consumer level, but they have been making it smarter and smarter, which is really nice. So more dead code to eliminate. I should upgrade and see if it reduces my bundle size, because I've got bundle performance benchmarks now on my PR, so it'll do a comparison with the baseline.
Awesome. Next up, we have the Thales, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, TypeScript compiler. And this was brought to us from Blue Sky user Jesse Alama. And this is a compiler that takes a subset of TypeScript and compiles it for the Lean language. And the Lean language is an open source programming language and proof assistant that enables correct, maintainable, and formally verifiable code. So definitely go check that out at github.com/Jesse Alama/Tails.
Yeah, that's cool. I haven't heard of Lean before.
This is the first time I've heard of it, but it looks cool.
Nice.
And they've got a quotable quote from Terence Tao, famous mathematician. Lean enables large-scale collaboration, allowing mathematicians to break down complex proofs into smaller, verifiable components. This formalization ensures correctness of proofs, facilitates contributions from a broader community. With Lean, we are able to see how AI can accelerate formalization of mathematics, opening up new possibilities. So what's interesting here is like we're verifying proofs. Like this is like a proof checker,
nice.
Which is pretty cool.
That's
and
cool.
then having Terence Tao, drop a quote here is pretty interesting.
That's cool. Yeah, let's talk about some community highlights. What's been going on lately? We actually have quite a few things.
Yeah, I think we're going to start with maybe some sad news. Is the blog duality, Tuality, is going offline, and Dr. Axel put up a post, and they said, you know what? A couple things have happened recently. The income from his book sales have gone to zero, and the traffic has disproportionately increased beyond what he can afford. So he's taking all of his free blog and books offline because AI crawlers are stealing his work. This is a huge bummer because he is kind of the authority on a lot of the TypeScript features and JavaScript features out there on the web. And you should go buy his book, and you can go buy those books at PayHip, and we'll provide a link to that.
Yeah, you should definitely do that. Yeah, it's really unfortunate now that you have to be thinking about like what you put online can just now be slurped up by these AI companies. Even though Cloudflare does have a way to block crawlers, but it's not a guarantee, right? Because as soon as one gets through, I mean, game over, right? And so the only guaranteed, really the only quote unquote guaranteed way is to have like a members only section, like to put it behind authentication. But it's still not a guarantee, right? Because anybody can create an email and anybody can verify that email. And once they're in, they will have access to whatever it is. It does makes it harder, but yeah.
Yeah. This next one is a blog post from Jovi de Croock. I believe that's how you pronounce their name, talking about hardening NPM publishing. And they go through, all of the things that you probably should be doing right now, which is automate publishing with OIDC, don't use the tokens. And they show you an example of how to do that in like the right way. And in GitHub Actions, it's kind of goofy because you have to like set up a permissions block that gives the ID token like a write permission in the actions runner so that you can actually like build that token. And then you need to enable like provenance, talk about how to do provenance in GitHub, and then, limit who can actually do publishing with two-factor authentication. And then, for consumers, what you should be doing, like basically don't use NPM, use PNPM, use minimum release age, watch for provenance regressions. So this is trust policy, no downgrade. So like if it did have provenance and then suddenly it doesn't, that's a bad signal. Like either, someone goofed or it's malicious. So in either case, you want to like avoid that.
There's a surprising tip, actually. Oh, did you know this too? Gate your publishing behind a GitHub environment, because GitHub environments require manual approval before a job runs, and they can restrict which branches can deploy to them, and they have their own scoped secrets. This means that even if someone pushes a bad commit to main, the published job won't run without an explicit approval step from someone with access to that environment. That's a really good tip.
Yeah, that is also a good tip, especially if like you're using a thing where you can't get away from a token.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a place where you need to use a token, like it's just not implemented yet, or whatever you're using, it's like a legacy platform, or it's like another platform that's the only way to do it. Just add defense and depth here. And I have my own personal take on staged publishing, because I went through and did this weekend, and it's definitely not super fun to do. I went through and did it for all of the packages that we have. It took me an entire afternoon to do, because each change to like enable the staged permission on the OIDC token took an OTP prompt, and each change to change it so that you don't allow token publishings, only 2FA publishings, took another OTP prompt. And I have like 36 packages. So it took me forever to go through all of them and update the security settings. There's no like mass update. It's a real pain in the butt.
Yeah.
I was displeased.
That's too bad. But now that it's set up, what do you get out of it?
So the cool thing here, now that it's set up, is packages aren't published automatically. So they go to like a staging area, and in order for that staged package to be available to people on the internet, someone with like the access to the NPM package. So you also want to limit your circle of trust here. Someone with access to that NPM package with 2FA on their account can go and click approve, get prompted for an OTP, one-time password, and then publish the package. So it's a guard against automatic stuff. It is definitely not super fun, especially for like, hey, we've got a high volume of commits hitting main that we want to publish. But I think the alternative is, you don't want to get got in a supply chain attack. So this just takes like a new standard of practice for maintainers to go and look. It's like, hey, let me look at this particular version. Another piece of feedback for the NPM folks, if they're listening, is it's not super easy to see what changed in that package. They give you like a command line thing to run to see the diff, and that's not super helpful on the web UI. It's just like, this new version is here. You can click like,
yeah,
hey, show me the difference, and then it gives you a CLI command. You're like, oh, okay, that doesn't help me a whole bunch. And then you can click approve. So it's like, okay, well, there's still it's still kind of clunky to use, but it's better than getting got.
Yeah. Hopefully, it seems like we got to get this out the door. I'm not sure why they didn't burn 1 million tokens on making it production ready immediately when they launched. Because of the grace of AI, they should have been able to do it. This is NPM we're talking about. They should have an unlimited budget.
Yeah, I think this is definitely like in the MVP territory. Like, hey, we got to stop the bleeding, which I do applaud them for getting this out so quickly after the recent round of Shai-Hulud.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll get better and better. Next up, this is a cool post on tsgo, and this is from Stack Overflow, their blog. Why does tsgo use so much memory? Now, Eric, you had an educated guess without even reading. And what was your educated guess?
My guess was, to avoid contention, each thread has their own copy of the source. That was my guess.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, so basically that's what it comes down to. It's the type checker, because the way tsgo multi-threads type checking is by creating a pool of checker for each thread. And when a checker is created, it's given the entire TypeScript program AST and all its files. So what's cool is they go into a lot of detail for like, okay, so that's true, but like what exactly is being allocated, and let's look at all the data structures and data types and stuff. So it's a pretty cool post. It's basically just like a here's how it works type of post. So like a deep dive if you're interested in that. The conclusion is basically that this was fun to like dive deep into it. And how could memory usage be made better in the future? And it says that garbage collecting types sounds promising, especially since TypeScript types behave like regular values in a programming language. So transient types wouldn't be bound to an AST node or anything and should get GC'd. Another option for reducing memory usage is using data structures which share data. This is used in functional programming languages where data structures like lists, maps, etc. are immutable, and a naive implementation would mean duplicating the data on every append. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I wonder if this will sort of inform some of the memory updates to tsgo in the future. Pretty fun. Next up from Viget, I'm going to say. Could be Viget, could be Viget. This is from Solomon Hawk. It's about fixing TypeScript performance problems, and it's a case study. And it's a good one, and it has a lot of practical tips because both me and you, Eric, have diagnosed TypeScript performance issues. But this is not like script performance issues. This is TypeScript performance issues, like type instantiations and things like that. So it goes into some details on what compiler flags you can pass, like extended diagnostics, list files only, explain files, and then to put it into analysis, a trace analysis, so that you can see what's going on. So you can use Chrome's trace viewer, which should be available if you type in your Chrome about / tracing in Chromium-based browsers, but you can also use the newer Perfetto UI to look at those traces. So it's pretty cool.
Awesome. Next, I have a talk from Rick Van Zanten. I am so sorry if I got your name wrong, but it's about Rust-inspired TypeScript. So this is a great video about taking key learnings from like Rust programming and using those kind of patterns in your TypeScript development. So like things like modeling impossible states. So make sure that impossible states are just impossible in your program, which is, awesome. Make failures explicit. So instead of, relying on exceptions, this is like errors as values kind of idea, which a lot of things like Effect are doing as well. Things like keeping mutations local, don't like mutate global state. Things like this. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in this talk that you should take a look at, but definitely take a watch. It's 30 minutes long.
Nice.
I have a blog post from Marvin Hagemeister speeding up the JavaScript ecosystem with oxlint and oxformat. And this is talking about how and why oxlint and oxformat have sped things up. The Oxy project is a top contender for becoming the standard tooling platform of choice because the Rust parser is well engineered for performance and it has an immense amount of scrutiny in it already. And it's mega fast. So they talk about how they made it mega fast and some of the techniques that they went through to make it that fast. So it's really quite interesting. A lot of this kind of goes down to, hey, measure, profile things, and syscalls are expensive. So avoiding syscalls can really speed up your thing. So like things like, asking if a file exists, asking if a thing exists, like doing any of those, like, hey, I'm going to go ask the operating system for something, that does take some time.
Yeah, and they have some screenshots from the Rust profiler. And I think that the common pattern here in a bunch of these blog posts actually is using profiling tools to like actually see the trace so that you can figure out what's going on.
That's right.
We've got 2 blog posts from Mastro.js, and you can listen to our episode that talks about Mastro if you want to learn more about it. The first is more philosophical blog post. Maro is asking, is AI causing a repeat of front-end's lost decade? And it's talking about deskilling and how we had a deskilling of the front end. And you probably know this if you're a front-end developer, but like Tailwind and ShadeCN and Bootstrap even, and things like that, where you started to like learn these frameworks and then stopped learning more about the fundamentals of like semantic HTML and CSS.
Mm-hmm.
And even I've felt that too lately. And I've expressed this on the podcast. Like I bought Andy Bell's CSS course because I wanted to dive back into some of the fundamentals of CSS now that it's evolved so much. Like I forget what we're at. Are we at CSS 5 or something like that? But like when I learned CSS, it was like CSS 2 and like CSS 3, right? So there's been a lot of evolution in CSS. And I've learned already that the way that I've used to use CSS with like container classes and things like that is really not a great pattern anymore, and that I can switch up my CSS architecture to make it better. So anyway, Maro's making the point that what's currently happening to programmers more generally seems really similar to what web developers in particular have been going through already. The skilled job of writing code manually is being, quote, eliminated by the introduction of technologies operated by semi or unskilled workers. And so I think this sort of speaks to some of how we're feeling for what's going on with how LLMs are sort of are causing us to lose our skills and atrophy.
Yeah, I think this just kind of resonates with me as well. I think, especially for this, like even with Stack Overflow, I think a lot of it kind of unfortunately shakes down to discipline. And then I think at the end of the post, they say that for any part of system, you need to know what trade-offs you're making and then decide whether or not you should buy a service, use an open source library, or use an LLM to write it, or write it yourself. You know, when the hype has died down, the industry will realize it's just one more tool in the toolbox. But until then, you're going to see a lot of ugly things, ugly code, broken communications, layoffs under the guise of AI, which I totally agree with.
Yep. And next up is a more tactical blog post on 4 ways to do component scoped CSS without a complex build step. This is really nice. So this is talking about how to use it within Mastro in the context of Mastro, which, by the way, is that TypeScript static site builder. And so he talks about one big CSS file. This is the great way to get started, right? You just have the one CSS file. And actually, this is very similar to what Andy Bell teaches too. Like you can have one big CSS file, and if you architect it with the right patterns, using layout patterns and stack patterns and things like that, you create more generic classes that you apply to stuff, more semantic classes, you can get away with a lot where you don't have to create custom CSS for so much things. The other approach they go through is a plain CSS file for each component, and you can do that in Mastro pretty easily. You've also got inlining the styles into the component. And by the way, did you know that CSS at scope rules are now supported in every browser, including Safari? So they're a browser native solution to what BEM and CSS modules have been trying to do, scoping the styles to only apply to specific DOM subtrees. So there's your tip of the day, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people really like BEM, and it has always driven me up the wall.
Yeah, I don't really use BEM. I have been a fan of CSS modules, but they were also awkward to use because they're not exactly the same as vanilla CSS, but the scope style keyword is native to CSS. So it's just supported in the browsers now. So that's even better.
Nice.
The fourth approach, and the last one, is, of course, server-side CSS and JS, which if you take my React performance course, you know that I'm not a huge fan of because it has both runtime and compile time performance issues. But this is using Mastro's CSS tag literal. So I think it is much faster, and you're writing native CSS within the tagged template literal, just like you do with Mastro's HTML tag template literal, where, quote unquote, it's just HTML and it's just CSS, but it is scoped, which is pretty cool.
Love it. Next up is a video from WebDev Simplified. A type-safe backend API is incredibly easy with Hano. And WebDev Simplified goes through how to build a fully safe API that uses email, password auth, JWT, and API keys to secure the application. So if you've been wondering how to do a Hano app, this might be a thing for you. It seems like he's going to go in pretty excruciating detail. It's almost a 2-hour video. So if you are like, oh, I really need to scale up on Hano, check this out.
That's very cool. Next up, I saw that DaxRad, who, by the way, you also have a cool link for later when we get to that piece. This is how they use Effect.ts at OpenCode and how they have used it to architect OpenCode. And this was given at Effect Miami recently. So you can watch this talk on how they use Effect to make OpenCode better and some practical tips on the ways that they've made it work.
Awesome. Next up, JP on Blue Sky noted that there's something interesting in TypeScript's Object.assign types, that it extends deeply, but Object.assign in JavaScript is actually completely shallow. So they have a TypeScript Lang playground for it And I thought this was really interesting just as a gotcha in the TypeScript type system, where you'll get Object.assign, it'll deeply assign the types, like fully recursively, but that's not how JavaScript works. It doesn't recursively add the deep object. So it only does the shallow.
Right. So the types that you inspect, that you get back in the IntelliSense or in the editor, don't actually match the type that you are going to get at runtime for nested objects within an Object.assign.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I thought this was an interesting post and just a thing that actually has bitten me before, where I've had to add I've just done like a recursive object assign with, I call it like merge deep, but this is a thing that's bitten me before. But I really liked the succinct TypeScript playground and example of this, because it really just kind of like puts a pin in like, oh, this does seem like a problem.
Cool. We have a bleed of the week. It's actually an image, so sorry, you're going to have to actually click on the link in the show notes. But imagine the Toy Story logo, but it's just the T and the S, and it's on an actual like banner, and it seems like it might be in Korea, is because I see a Seoul bistro underneath it, but it's just like Disney Pixar TS, and it's like the Toy Story font. And someone said LMAO, and then it was subbleeded TypeScript, which I thought was funny.
That's great.
That should be the logo, don't you think, of TypeScript?
That should be the Toy Story TypeScript logo is based.
I'm
a fan.
What are they trying to advertise there? Like, you wouldn't know it was Toy Story unless you were a fan of Toy Story already. Like, unless you knew that the T and the S were for Toy Story, you wouldn't know, because that's all the banner is.
Yeah, unless that's like a localization thing, like that was how it's known in that area.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But the font is pretty characteristic of Toy Story, so maybe they're relying on the font recognition, although I'd argue that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I had to double take, like I had to do a double take for like, what is this actually? And then right above it, you can see faintly it says Disney Pixar. And I'm like, oh, well, it's probably Toy Story then.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You have some cool links for us?
I do. I have an open code related cool link. There's a great podcast episode with Dax Rad, one of the developers of open code, talking all about how they built open code. And this podcast in particular is more from like the business and strategy perspective, which kind of tickles our brains here. And I walked away with, wow, Dax really knew what he was doing. So I was actually gripped this entire time. I've really been enjoying open code over the last week or so. I've been really diving into open code and how it works, and it's dope. I think they have a really compelling product, especially for like, hey, bring your own model wherever it is. Because I've been playing with local models using open code. Yeah. So I've been using like local Quen on my Mac Mini. I've been playing with like Anthropic API, and I've been playing with their provided adapter layer Zen, which allows you to access a whole bunch of models that they've vetted with open code. But so I've been able to experiment a lot as part of like a mandate from work to be like, hey, you need to know how these things work, so go and figure it out. So I'm like, okay, I'll go and figure it out. And I've really enjoyed open code. It's also, in my opinion, a masterclass in how to build a terminal UI and how to onboard people that might not be super terminal users. Yeah. It's great. It's a fantastic experience. Yeah. I've had a blast using it.
Nice. I don't have any cool links, so we'll just skip me.
No, nothing cool happened to you.
I can't.
Brando Sando.
I was just doing that. Well, I'm trying to think. I probably sent something. I didn't play any of the new games. I mean, you could have talked about Mina, but I didn't play that.
Yeah, I've honestly, like, I waited for Mina to unlock, and then I was just playing Slay the Spire 2 until I passed out. So I haven't played Mina yet. So I need to play Mina the Hollower, which is the new Yacht Club game, which it's getting like super great reviews. So I'm super stoked. And it looks absolutely gorgeous. Like just absolutely pristine.
I'll hijack that as my cool link, because I think if you've liked Shovel Knight, which I loved, you're going to probably like Mina. And it's been getting 10s across the board as far as review scores go. So I'm looking forward to playing it. I just haven't done it yet. So I'll link to
Yeah.
it. So dear listener, you can go check out Mina the Hollower and see if you like that.
I'm planning on playing it very soon after I like exhaust my Slay the Spire 2 addiction, because dang, that has now gripped my frontal lobe like Balatro has. So now I'm just Slay the Spire 2ing.
And you know what? Once you start it, or even before, start tracking it on Keep Track My Games, because now you can track your playthroughs on it, so you can see how many hours that you pour into these games.
Mm-hmm.
Fun stuff.
And Slay the Spire 2 works on Linux, because I don't, the only time the Windows machine is on is when we're recording right now.
Nice. That's awesome. Time for the Minnesota long goodbye.
That's right.
We don't have a crazy amount of time. Every time we do one of these long goodbyes, I have to like cut 20 minutes of it. So we're going to have to try to avoid having a prolonged conversation about stuff. But what is jumping out to you?
I think a lot of what we're seeing in like the community highlights and a lot of the stuff that we're hearing and seeing from these big AI companies is nuance is hard and people are getting hurt. Like certainly Dr. Axel Roshmar going offline, that sucks.
Yeah. I mean, and I've thought about it too, because I want to write about stuff, because I do have my blog. I actually have several blogs. So one of my goals this year is to consolidate that so that I have just one place where I can do my writing. But I'm also cognizant of like, if I write about things, it's going to make its way into like training data. Like there's almost no question about that. So then why bother writing is like one question. And I think it's still important to write and to keep that published, but I don't want to have to deal with like traffic to my site that's like junk traffic. And so Dr. Axel is speaking to one thing that I've dealt with or had to try to deal with for my own app. So not just like my blog. My blog is not a big deal. That's all hosted with Ghost. So like I don't pay for traffic actually, which is nice. I just pay the flat fee per month. But for Keep Track My Games, I do pay, for bandwidth for Cloudflare, right? And I have noticed that there has been an uptick in like robot bandwidth traffic. So I've had to implement page rules and a few other things to try to mitigate some of that. The other nice thing, at least for my app, is that the majority of it is only accessible if you're authenticated. And so those number of requests have pretty much stayed the same, because I just have my monthly active users that are like humans that use up that. But a lot of the SEO traffic or the bot traffic is going to my public game details pages and stuff. And so like I don't want to have to pay for that traffic that's like junk traffic. It's not actual people. So I've had to try to deal with that. And luckily Cloudflare does provide some controls over that where I can block specific crawlers and things like that. And that has reduced the amount of traffic that I've had to deal with.
Yeah. On the flip side too, like for folks using LLMs and agents to do stuff, I think Maro and the Rust folks have a pretty good take on this. Like, one, you want to avoid de-skilling yourself. I think it takes discipline to apply things in a way that are helpful and don't directly cause you harm. Like as a developer, you're not losing your skills. So one area where I am just not going to use something is new feature development. Like, and I think that's where Rust is landing right now. And I think that's a good idea. So like net new novel feature development, I feel like that's like one, that's just important to be thinking about. Like as a human, like if you can turn the crank and something boilerplate falls out, is that a good new feature? Is that actually valuable? So I think there's that part of it. Like I think there's incredible foot gun here, just from like your own brain and your own product, like devaluing your own skills, devaluing your own product if you're not careful.
Yeah,
I think where these things are useful, and then we've talked about this offline, is review, copy editing, not writing, copy editing. So you've written the prose as a human, and then you like have it go and look for typos and grammar.
Yeah, typos, exactly.
I think it's like going back to my reasoning is humans are the source of the signal.
Mm-hmm.
And like the LLM is not capable of signal. It's only capable of expanding on signal.
Right, exactly.
So, it really, really goes back to don't automate the thinking. That the thinking is the realm of the human. Like, that's where you need to be thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it and the decisions that you're making. And crank turning is the machine. Like, that's that's how I want to think about it. And honestly, every time I get a Jira card that's written by an LLM, it wastes my time because there is zero actual signal in there.
Right.
And it's all wrong.
Yep.
Because it doesn't know our domain at all. Like, it can't possibly know our domain or our systems. It can't. And so like everything inside of that Jira card is just made up.
Uh-huh. And then,
but it sounds plausible to the person who wrote it.
And then that creates cognitive overload. So like, even if someone did write it themselves, you're just now being trained to like assume that everything is being written by AI and everything is taking longer because of that.
Yeah. And certainly with LLM generated prose and code, like, it'll make mistakes that a human with a brain would never make.
Mm-hmm.
Like, legitimately. I've humans will make different mistakes, but I feel like I know where to look for those. But like, LLMs will make bonkers mistakes.
Two examples that happened today, just because they're fresh out of my mind. It wrote a PR to add some authentication demos to my Next.js site. And so one of the components, named it auth MIDDR WARE. And so it worked, like it was rendering everything. But when I went to the code review, when I went to review all the files, because I do go file by file and I review it, I was like, why the heck is it named? Like, it misspelled it just randomly.
That's bonkers.
So, of course, I fixed it. And then the other example was it was doing an isadmin role check. So it did it properly in one place where it was like session.role because it's getting the current user session, session.role equals admin, and that was strongly typed, right? But then in a different area of the code, it said session.user equals the admin username, like the person who is the admin. I'm like, no. This is not what you do, buddy.
A human with a brain would not do that.
Right. So first of all, I encapsulated it into a utility that was like isadmin role so that it's consistent. And then I replaced both instances of those so that it was using the proper thing. Now you see the test passed initially, right? And everything looked good, like everything worked. But it was a subtle bug because if I had added another demo user that was also an admin, that would not have worked. Like, that would have been denied access because its username didn't match the user that it had put in there. So this is what we're talking about with like buried in the sea of code that it outputs. There will be subtle little things that if you're not careful, and even if you are careful, they're going to sneak through.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I just thought of that I wanted to comment on was it's hard to gauge like a one-to-one ROI with stuff because if I didn't have the tool, I probably wouldn't have done it. So that I wouldn't have spent the time to do it. But now that I did have the tool and I did use it, that took a little bit of time, but it also saved me a bunch of time if I had planned to do it or like when I got around to it, And this is what I've been finding in my own app, which is I'm at the point now where I'm very, very close to being able to port my old .NET Framework code to ASP.NET Core now. And I'm probably going to have the robot do most of it because it's so tedious that I do not want to do it. But because it's so tedious, I've been procrastinating on it.
Yeah. And I like that you bring up ROI. And I don't want to belabor this too much, but it's really easy to blow money.
Oh, yeah.
Like I set up some spending limits and I hit them immediately.
Yep.
And I'm glad I set up spending limits. Put it that because I put very conservative spending limits. I'm like, I won't use $100.
Right.
I used it in 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. You have to put those budget limits on, otherwise you're going to have a nasty, nasty surprise.
Yeah.
By the way, I had shared this with you. This will be the last thing that we talk about because it's a tactical takeaway here. If you're trying to figure out what is the ROI of these tools, for you personally, there is a way to do it, which is to calculate your effective hourly rate. This is an idea that I first came across in the book Your Money or Your Life. It's a really good book by Vicki Robbins. It's more of a philosophical money book, but you should read it. But anyway, she brings up the calculation of your effective hourly wage. Now, if you're not a wage worker, like if you're not an hourly wage worker, this still works. And the reason it works is because you can take your annual salary, let's just say an even 100,000 per year. Let's say that that's your annual salary. And then you just, from there, figure out how much is that per hour. So if you take 100,000 divided by 52 weeks, that's 1923 divided by 40, right? Let's just say that you work an even 40 hours a week. You make an effective hourly wage of $48 per hour, except that that's a lie because your salary is not your take-home pay. So you have to figure out what's the actual dollar amount that you take home per year. And then you also need to not just count the 40 hours a week that you work, or the 50 hours, or the 60 hours that you work, if that's in your case. You also have to include the amount of time related to work. And this could be stress-related stuff and expenses, like I only eat out because I don't have time to cook for myself because of work, or I have to commute, and so I have to pay for gas, or I have to pay for public transportation. And if I didn't have this job, I would not have to pay that. So that's included as a work expense. You have to take in all these variables that are going to be very depressing once you actually go through it. And then your real effective hourly wage is something that you can point to, and then you can say, here's what an hour of my time is worth. And so if you are using an AI tool and you pay less than that, you're getting more value out of it. So if something would have taken you a weekend to do, you could easily say that would have easily been at least 4 hours of my time. So if I did that, that means that those 4 hours were worth $192. So if I pay for the AI tool to build me something and it takes less time than that and it costs less money than that, then I'm net out. And like, as far as an effective hourly rate goes, but then you of course have to think about, like, was that something that you would have enjoyed doing? Because I would not have used an AI tool to do something that I would have enjoyed doing, because you could say that's priceless, right? Your joy is probably priceless.
Yeah.
So, but that's the tactical takeaway, is that there is a way to calculate some amount of ROI from these tools from a pure monetary perspective. If you either work a W-2 job or you work an hourly job or what have you.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be clear-eyed about, like, also the output.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is the output what you wanted?
Mm-hmm.
Like, did I just blow $10 on output that I'm going to throw away?
Yeah. But the thing is I think that, oh my God, we keep going now. But this is bringing a new thought, which is that I think that programmers and coders are entering this brave new world that they haven't had to enter before, which is thinking about value and outcomes that business people and entrepreneurs have been thinking about now for decades. Like that you had to deal with it. And this is something that I had to learn coming from corporate America, working for myself, which is that a lot of these issues that people are having with, like, oh, the output's not as good, is basically the same exact thing that you're going to run into if you hire contractors or if you hire people to work for you, which is that they're just simply not going to do as good a job as you would do. But your time is worth money. And so it's a trade-off that you're making. You're paying for someone else to do some work, and you're hoping that the quality is going to be good, but that's why you vet them, right? Or that's why you train them, or that's why you find someone that's really good and then you keep paying them to do work. But with these AI tools, the reason that they're kind of alluring to business people especially is because it takes away a lot of that headache of trying to find people and the trust that you have with people, and trying to find someone on Fiverr that will do an actual good job, or trying to find that contractor that your friend recommended who ends up ghosting you or charging way too much, or saying that it costs $10,000, but then you get the bill and it ends up being $30,000, right? So AI tools get rid of a lot of that headache, and that's why they're alluring. But you can apply those same principles to your own work. So if you treat it as if you are running a solo business, and how much would you pay someone else to do this job? And would you be happy with what they do? So that's the way that I frame it, and that's the way that I think about it.
Yeah. And I think it all comes back to discipline about what these tools are good at and what they're not. Because if you're using them for things that they're not good at, or it's a high risk area,
you're going to be real disappointed.
You'll be very disappointed. I've been very disappointed in the last 5 days, and I feel like I've gotten a lot of mileage out of really cheap stuff. But now I know what not to do.
Right. Yep. Exactly. All right. That should wrap it up. Sounds good. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to TypeScript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at kamronigus.com, and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.